I'm William J. Jackman. Everybody calls me Jay. Well, I guess I sort of come from an FFA family. When I tell this story, I always begin by saying my father was an FFA chapter president at Park City High School at that time, back in, I guess, like the 1940s, probably mid-1940s is when my father was an FFA at Park City. And my brother was an FFA at Park City and also at Barron County High School, because by that time the county schools had consolidated, and then by the time I came along, we had freshmen still at the four middle schools: Park City, Temple Hill, Austin Tracy, and Heistville. And then we had the senior FFA chapter at Barron County High School, the new high school, which was sophomores, juniors, and seniors, but the freshmen were still out at the middle schools, and so we had junior FFA chapters. So I started my Ag Ed FFA experience at the Park City Junior FFA chapter at Park City Middle School, and then when I was a sophomore, I moved over to the senior high FFA chapter at Barron County High School. And so I guess I sort of always knew that I was going to be a part of agricultural education at FFA because my father had been and my brother had been, and so I was just carrying on the family tradition, and just never even imagined that I wouldn't be a part of ag education and FFA as a student.
Give us a bit of an overview of your life since you got out of high school and your career, and did the high school ag program and FFA program contribute to any success in your life and your career?
Well, I would say it probably did a little bit, because I can say honestly that I've never had a paycheck that didn't have something to do with agricultural education and FFA. I was very involved in FFA in high school, and then majored in agriculture at Western, and then went to UK and did a master's degree in agricultural education, got certified to teach, and worked with a couple of guys named Charles Byers and Rod Tullock. You may be familiar with them. And then I worked a few years in an ag education role, not teaching, but working for the University of Kentucky as the Director of Student Affairs in the College of Agriculture. And so I visited ag ed programs all over Kentucky and encouraged ag ed students to attend the University of Kentucky. And after doing that a few years, I went to Virginia Tech and did a PhD. Then I went to the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. It was in D.C. for 11 years, and the first 4 years of that, I was at the U.S. Department of Agriculture managing competitive grant programs in higher education in agriculture. So still, a connection to agricultural education at that point, very much at the higher education level, not so much at the secondary level. And then they got the opportunity to become the executive director of what at that time was the National Vocational Agriculture Teachers Association, NVATA, and about a year later we changed the name to NAAE, the National Association of Agricultural Educators, and that's where I've been now for 22 years as executive director of the professional society that represents school-based agriculture teachers all across the United States. We moved that office to Lexington, Kentucky in July of 2003. So you can come home again. I'm proof of that. I came back to Kentucky and brought NAAE with me when I came, and have really enjoyed a very fulfilling career related to agricultural education and FFA. And I don't know how unique it is that I could say that I've never had a paycheck that didn't have something to do with agricultural education and the FFA. So it's my life's work, from a professional standpoint. I'm an ag ed guy.
Jay, what do you consider your highlight experience, and you can do more than one, that you had in high school agriculture and FFA?
Oh, it'd be hard to name, even one or two. I had such great ag teachers and received such great encouragement from them, and accomplished so much because of their encouragement and their good teaching. They afforded me lots of opportunities, and I was involved in a lot of the leadership type contests and events and activities. I was chapter secretary and a chapter president and a regional president in Barron River region, and then state president of Kentucky Association FFA 1979-80. Participated in a lot of different activities and events like Mr. Bailey, one of my teachers, was very, the secretary's book contest was very important to him, and so I'm glad to say that I was able to bring a secretary's book state championship home to Mr. Bailey when I was the chapter secretary. I was the state beef impromptu speaking winner when I was a junior in 1978. Participated in extemporaneous public speaking in 1979 when I was a senior. Made it to the state convention. Totally bombed it when I got there, but at least I made it to the convention. Chapter meeting, parliamentary procedure was a big event for me, and we were pretty big into that at Berrien County back in those days. And Mr. Greer, our teacher, always worked with us on the chapter meeting event and prepared us well. And so there was a lot of different activities that I participated in, but we weren't just an FFA chapter either. We had great experiences in the classroom. My teachers were about teaching, and they truly believed that good teaching will result in accomplishments through FFA, and that FFA was the showcase for our accomplishments in the classroom and the laboratory, the shop, or out in the field with our projects or whatever. So many good experiences and lots of activity there. Much thanks to my teachers.
Well, tell us, I assume you may have gone to FFA camp as a student, maybe at state conventions and national conventions. You don't have to elaborate in great depth, but what's some memories that you might have?
The FFA Leadership Training Center was something that we always looked forward to every summer. And I remember Mr. Maddox telling us that on the very first day of our week that we were all starting at the same place, and that, you know, that we all had the opportunity to win the leadership awards, and that we were all on an equal plane, and that it was going to depend on us and how well we did and in our classes and our activities through the week, that we could all have the same equal chance to win the leadership award and the outstanding leadership award. And you know, I very fondly remember those types of things. I was never much of an athlete myself, so I was always a little bit frustrated with the FFA camp experience because a lot of the other kids there were really good athletes and I was not. But the one thing that I could do is row a boat. And so I always made sure that I was the boat rower on my team, or at least one of them. And so I could always do pretty well in rowing a rowboat. And I don't think they have rowboats anymore. They have canoes now probably, but we had rowboats back in those days. And so I could contribute to my group, you know, by rowing that old rowboat. But then the leadership stuff there was important. You know, I remember funny stories about camp too. I remember, you know, somebody would always tie a monofilament fishing line to the old dinner bell, and at midnight, you know, somebody would be ringing the bell and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of good positive experiences from camp. Oh, I know one thing about camp that I need to tell you is that when I was your graduate student at the University of Kentucky, you asked me one time to work on the program of activities for the UK Ag Ed Club, the agriculture student, the Ag Ed, the Ag Ed Society. And so I did some work on this program of activities. Not with a great deal of instruction from you at that point. I mean, I'm sure you were going to bring it, but you just asked me to kind of look over the program of activities. And so not only did I look over it, I rewrote it, and I pretty much had it ready. And so when I brought it to you for you to give the first critique and for you to, you know, help me and to get me on the right track, it was done. And you said to me, you don't remember this, but you said to me, how did you know how to do this? And I said, my ag teachers taught me how to do this at FFA camp because we had the chapter hour at FFA camp. And what Berrien County FFA did during chapter hour is we, the officers and the members that were at camp, we did our program of activities. And so James Bailey and Jerry Greer and Frank Rowland and Jewel Colliver, they taught us to do a program of activities. And so as your graduate student, years later, when you asked me to do a program of activities, you didn't have to teach me to do it. My ag teachers had already taught me how to do it. As state president, you know, the year that I was state FFA president, that was a pretty special state FFA convention at the Galt House. But I had several conventions, you know, before then. One interesting story that I remember is the first time I had any encounter at all with a national FFA officer was, I guess, when I was a freshman, or probably between my freshman and sophomore year, when I went to the Kentucky FFA convention at the Galt House in Louisville. And there was this guy there that he had big fuzzy hair. He had a big fuzzy hairdo, and he didn't have a state or a chapter name on his FFA jacket. He had an emblem, had an FFA emblem on the back of his jacket, but he didn't have anything else on the back of the jacket. And I remember thinking, that poor fella has had to get an FFA jacket from somewhere. He's got a hand-me-down FFA jacket, and they've had to tear the state and the chapter name off of the back of the jacket so that he could have a jacket. And it turned out it was Sam Brownback, and he was a National FFA officer. And Sam then went on to become a United States Senator and a Commissioner of Agriculture in Kansas, and then the governor of the state of Kansas. So I remember that Sam Brownback story, when I thought he was a poor little FFA member that couldn't afford his own FFA jacket, and he was a National FFA officer. Well, I have given presentations all over the United States, very few states that I haven't been in to promote and talk about and advocate for school-based agricultural education. And in fact, I've been in several countries around the world doing the same. And each time when I begin a presentation about agricultural education, I say that other than my mother and father, sorry, my ag teachers were the most important influences in my life, other than my mom and dad. And I had a great mom and dad. But my ag teachers were amazing. And I've already called their names some, but I won't call their names again because they're worth it. Jerry Greer, James Bailey, Jewel Colliver, Frank Rowland. I had, as a sophomore, I had a guy that didn't teach ag for very long, but he was also an important influence for me. He then went on to be a biology teacher, but Keith Weaver. And they were just wonderful teachers. And I say they were teachers because they truly understood, Dr. Byers, they truly understood that their job was to be a teacher, and that a part of their job as an agriculture teacher was to advise FFA, was to supervise our work experiences outside the classroom, our SAE projects, our experiential learning enterprises, and that we could receive recognition and accolades for those projects and activities, but that they were about teaching us. And they could take a class that would be anywhere from special ed students all the way up to honor students, college-bound students in the same classroom at the same time, and they could engage them all. They could reach the special ed student, and they could reach the college-bound student, and they could teach every one of us. They could do that because they believed in teaching, and that FFA advice and supervising SAE projects was a part of their job as a teacher. But what they did first is teach, and they taught us all. And that's what I remember about them. And I've gotten to know in my career, 22 years with the National Ag Teachers Association, I know a lot of ag teachers. I've interacted with a lot of ag teachers. We have great ag teachers all over the United States, and I've been so honored in my career to work on behalf and to advocate for ag education and ag teachers. But I got to tell you, the ones that I had when I was in high school, they were phenomenal. I would say if you want to make your life worthwhile, if you want to make your life count for something, if you want to, at the end of every day, if you want to be able to go home and say, I made a difference in somebody's life today, I made a difference in the world. One, work in agriculture. Two, work in education. And the way to combine those is to be an ag teacher, to work in agricultural education. There's no important industry on our planet than agriculture. You know, depending on whose statistics you look at, it's estimated that the world population will peak at about 9.5 billion people by the year 2050. What that means to us in our agriculture industry in the United States and worldwide is that food and fiber production between now and 2050 must double. American agriculture has to lead that. There's no more important industry on our planet than agriculture. And then if you think about how important education is, preparing the next generation of students to work in agriculture or to be leaders in whatever profession they choose to do. You know, even if it's to be a productive citizen in their local communities, to be a good spouse, to be a good parent, to be a good taxpayer, to be a good citizen, to be a good member of a community. Ag education makes a difference in that. And so what I tell people all over the United States is consider working in agricultural education, because you do that, you do a good job at it. When you go home at night, you can sleep well and say, I made a difference today.
2 or 3 cents, what kind of advice or suggestions or wisdom would you share with beginning agriculture teachers?
Teach well. Hone your ability to teach every student in every class every day. And if you do that, very simply, if you do that, your FFA awards and accolades and recognition will come, because your FFA successes will naturally outflow from your good teaching. But you got to teach them all. That's your job, is to teach every child in your classes, not just a select few that might go and make you a star by winning a state or a national FFA contest. That's great when we do that. But our job is to teach them all. So my advice to young teachers is be a good teacher, and the FFA experiences will naturally outflow from it.